I've always believed that the road can feel alive at night. The way it hums under your tires, how the white lines flash past like the beat of a heart. Some people say that if you drive long enough, the road starts talking back. I used to think that was just something lonely travelers told themselves. But then came that November night, somewhere between the dying light of the Rockies and the empty plains of Wyoming, when I learned what it meant to drive a cursed road. It started simple, the way most bad ideas do. I'd been on the road for days in my old Volkswagen Westfalia, an off-white camper van that had seen better decades. I'd rebuilt most of it myself, a kind of therapy project after a rough patch in my life. My girlfriend, Claire, used to ride with me before things fell apart, but this trip wasn't about her anymore. It was about getting lost for a while, disappearing into the kind of silence that makes you honest with yourself. That evening, the sky was falling into the kind of darkness that doesn't fade, it drops. No stars yet, just a long gray stretch swallowing the last of the light. My gas gauge hovered near empty, and the nearest town on my map was a speck called Ralston Flats. Population unknown. I hadn't seen another car for at least an hour, and the air outside felt unnaturally still. The kind of stillness that makes your chest tighten, like the world is holding its breath. I rolled the window down. The smell of sagebrush and cold earth drifted in, sharp and dry. There's something about high desert air. It carries a memory of everything that ever burned there. Old campfires, rubber, maybe even people. I was already uneasy, though I couldn't tell why. The radio had gone to static a while back, and the hum of my van's old engine was the only sound left between me and the void. Then I saw her. At first, I thought it was a trick of the headlights, a shape on the side of the road, caught between shadow and distance. But as I drew closer, the figure took form. A woman, maybe mid-20s, standing by a rusted road sign, her arm outstretched, thumb pointing west. Long black hair whipped by the wind, and a faded backpack slung over one shoulder. I slowed down out of instinct. You don't see many hitchhikers out here, not since the early 2000s. I pulled over, cracked the window, and called out, "You okay out here?" She turned her head toward me. Slowly, like her neck resisted the motion. Her face was pale, almost gray in the high-beam glare. When she smiled, it was quick, like a reflex. "My car broke down," she said. Her voice was calm, too calm. "I just need a ride to the next town." I hesitated. Something about her tone didn't match the situation, but she looked harmless, thin jacket, no gloves, shivering in the cold. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the passenger door. She climbed in without another word. Her name, she said, was Lena. She was headed west to visit her sister in a place I'd never heard of. I asked where she'd been coming from, and she paused too long before answering. "Just east of here. Long drive." The air inside the van turned colder after she got in. I turned the heater knob, but the vents only breathed lukewarm air. The silence between us stretched thin. She kept her hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the windshield, but every so often I'd feel her glance at me. Not a normal glance, more like she was studying my face, as if trying to remember it. When I offered her water, she said quietly, "I don't drink much anymore." Something in the way she said it, flat, detached, sent a chill through me deeper than the cold outside. We passed a green highway sign that said Ralston Flats, 6 miles, though the letters looked old and worn, half faded by wind. But when I looked at the odometer 6 miles later, there was no town, no lights, just more darkness and road curling into forever. "Did we miss it?" I asked. Lena didn't answer. She was staring at the side mirror. Her reflection looked different somehow, her skin almost translucent in the dim glow of the dashboard. "You ever drive this road before?" She asked suddenly. "No," I said, keeping my eyes ahead. "First time through." "Then maybe you shouldn't have stopped," she murmured. I laughed nervously, but she didn't smile. She turned back toward the windshield, whispering something too low for me to hear. I thought she said, "They never learn." The van started sputtering a few miles later. The fuel gauge dropped faster than it should have, like something was draining it. I pulled to the shoulder. The engine coughed, then died completely. The headlights flickered and went out. We sat there in pitch black, surrounded by nothing. No wind, no engine hum, just the faint ticking of the cooling motor. I tried the ignition again. Nothing. Not even a click. My flashlight barely worked, its beam weak and yellow, but enough to show that the road ahead disappeared into mist. Lena sat perfectly still, hands in her lap, eyes closed. "Guess we'll have to wait it out," I said. "Maybe someone will come by." She opened her eyes slowly. "No one drives this road anymore." Her voice didn't sound human then, not robotic, but hollow, stripped of breath. I stared at her. "What do you mean?" She didn't respond. Outside, the fog thickened. It rolled across the asphalt like smoke, swallowing the edges of the van. I stepped out, the gravel crunching under my boots. The air was freezing, and the smell, sharp, metallic, hit me instantly, like wet rust or dried blood. When I turned back toward the van, Lena was gone. The passenger door was open, swinging gently. I shouted her name, but my voice was swallowed by the fog. My flashlight flickered, caught something pale moving just beyond its reach. A flash of fabric, a shadow, then nothing. That's when I saw the sign again, the same rusted sign she'd been standing beside before. Only this time it was right behind my van. Ralston Flats, 6 miles. The same dent, the same bullet hole through the word Flats. And then I heard the knock. 3 slow taps against the back of the van. At first I thought maybe it was just the wind. But then it came again, closer, deliberate. Knock. Knock. I backed toward the driver's door, heart pounding, flashlight trembling in my hand. The van seemed smaller now, like it was shrinking under the weight of the night. I forced myself to look through the rear window. There was a figure standing there. But it wasn't Lena anymore. It was me. Or something that looked exactly like me. Same jacket, same hair, same face staring back through the glass with dead eyes and a faint, twisted grin. The flashlight slipped from my hand. When it hit the ground, the beam scattered across the asphalt and caught something else, a line of footprints leading away from the van, small and bare, disappearing into the fog. And just before the light died completely, I heard her voice. Right behind me, whispering softly, "Drive if you want." The road always brings you back. I didn't move for a long time. Just stood there beside that dying flashlight, feeling the fog close in around me like a living thing. Every sound seemed amplified. The soft hiss of cooling metal, my own breath trembling, the faint rustle of something shifting beyond the headlight's corpse glow. I don't know what part of me finally broke the paralysis. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe something deeper. The part of the human brain that refuses to die in the dark. I reached for the van door, climbed inside, and locked it. The smell hit me first. Not the smell of old oil or dust, but something faintly sweet and wrong, like flowers left too long in water. The air felt heavy. My breath clouded in front of me, even though the heater was off. I turned the key again. Nothing. Just that hollow click of a dead battery. Then somewhere inside the fog came the sound of footsteps, slow, dragging, gravel crunching beneath bare feet. I leaned forward, trying to see out the windshield. The beam from the flashlight had rolled onto its side, pointing out across the road, and in that soft yellow cone of light I saw movement. Not fast, just a silhouette walking toward the van. Small, slender, swaying slightly. "Lena?" I called out, though my voice cracked halfway through. No answer. The figure stopped maybe 10 yards away. I could see the outline of her hair moving with the wind, her shoulders trembling. Then she tilted her head, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. I flicked the headlights again out of desperation, and somehow, impossibly, they came on. The fog exploded into white, blinding light. She was gone. Nothing but empty road and mist curling like smoke around the tires. That should have been the end of it. I should have waited for sunrise, maybe walked back the way I came once daylight broke. But something about that sign behind me kept gnawing at me. It shouldn't have been there. It wasn't possible for it to be there. I got out again. The fog was thinner now, and I could just make out the lettering through the haze. The metal looked old, corroded. I touched it, cold as ice. My fingertips left faint prints on the rust. And then, beneath the layer of grime, I saw something carved into the post. Not graffiti, not initials, a date. 11.03/2015. 10 years ago, it was carved deep enough to have drawn blood from whoever made it. And below the date, a single word, Lena. My stomach twisted. The name burned in my mind like an echo I hadn't wanted to hear. I staggered back toward the van, every nerve alive with panic. Inside, the dashboard clock flickered to life. 11:03 p.m., same numbers. Then the radio turned on by itself. Static at first, just a low hum. But underneath it, if you listened close, you could hear the faintest trace of a woman's voice whispering through the noise. They never learn. They never learn. I smacked the power knob off, but the sound didn't stop. It just grew fainter, more distant, like it was coming from the vents or the floorboards. I shoved the gear shift into neutral and twisted the key again. This time the engine sputtered, coughed, then caught. I didn't care how or why. It worked. I slammed it into drive and tore down the road, the van rattling like it was coming apart. The fog thinned, and I felt a rush of relief when I finally saw headlights up ahead. Another vehicle, maybe. Civilization. But as I got closer, my relief froze. It was another Volkswagen. Same make, same model, same off-white paint. Parked crooked across the shoulder like someone had pulled over in a hurry. I slowed down. The other van's door was hanging open. No one inside. And then I noticed the license plate. Same number as mine. I drove past it without looking back, refusing to accept what I'd seen. My mind tried to rationalize. It was coincidence, a trick of the light, fatigue, anything but what it was. But when I checked my mirrors, I nearly drove off the road, because the second van wasn't behind me anymore. It was ahead of me again. Parked the same way, door swinging open. The fog had returned, heavier than before, swallowing the road until I couldn't tell up from down. I pressed the gas, trying to outrun it, but the van's engine began to strain, groaning like something alive and dying. And then came that voice again, not from the radio this time, from the seat beside me. You can't outrun a road that remembers you. I turned. Lena was sitting there again. Same calm face, same gray skin. But her eyes were hollow, empty sockets rimmed with faint blue light. I swerved, nearly lost control, slammed on the brakes. The van spun sideways, skidded onto the gravel shoulder. My head hit the steering wheel. When I looked up again, she was gone. Only her backpack remained, resting neatly in the passenger seat. I sat there shaking, heart thundering, trying to convince myself this was exhaustion, a hallucination born from too many miles and too little sleep. I reached for the bag, hoping for something, an ID, a clue, anything to make sense of it. The zipper was stiff with rust. When I pried it open, I found a wallet inside, a driver's license. Name, Lena M. Holt date of birth, 1994. Date of death, 11.03/2015. The photo matched her face exactly. The fog pressed against the windshield like breath on glass. And in that reflection, through my own trembling hands, I could see her sitting in the back seat, quiet, staring forward, lips barely moving. I don't remember turning the key again. I just know I drove. Hard. I kept the wheel straight, eyes fixed on the vanishing point ahead, until I saw the glow of gas station lights cutting through the mist. The sign read, Ralston Flats Fuel and Supply. My hands shook as I pulled up beside the pump. A man stepped out from the small building, his coat flapping in the wind. He looked at me like I'd crawled out of a grave. "Where'd you come from?" he asked. I told him about the road, about running out of gas, about the woman I picked up. His face went pale. "You shouldn't have driven that way," he said. "They closed Highway 16 10 years ago, washed out in a flood. Nobody uses it anymore." I stared at him, heart hammering. "That's impossible. I was just there." He shook his head slowly. "If you were, you wouldn't be here talking to me." Behind him, on the wall of the gas station, hung a faded newspaper clipping in a cracked frame. The headline read, "Two dead in Highway 16 flood. Local woman 21 found near Ralston Flats sign." The photo beneath it showed a mangled Volkswagen van. Mine. And standing beside it under a thin veil of mist was a face I knew all too well. Mine. The man's words didn't make sense. not in any way that fit the laws of the living world. I remember just staring at him through the fog glass, my pulse thudding in my ears, that old neon sign buzzing above us like it was ready to blow. "Are you sure you're okay, son?" he asked. "You look pale as hell." I forced a laugh that came out wrong, thin and brittle. "Yeah, just tired, long drive." He gave me that look, half suspicion, half pity, before turning back toward the small building. I got out and started pumping gas, even though my hands were still shaking. The nozzle clicked off too quickly. The gauge didn't move. That's when I noticed something strange. The concrete around the pump was cracked, not from age, but from being submerged once. You could see faint lines of water damage on the side of the building, a murky ring about waist high. And in the distance, beyond the lot's weak lights, I could hear the faint echo of running water. Not a creek, something wider, a river maybe, but the map hadn't shown anything nearby. Inside the station, the fluorescent lights flickered as I walked in. The air smelled of old coffee and damp wood. A small TV in the corner played a static-filled weather report. The man stood behind the counter, watching me closely. I tried to steady my voice. "That road back there, you said it washed out 10 years ago?" He nodded. "November 3rd, 2015. Storm hit sudden. Flash flood took out 6 miles of asphalt and 2 bridges. Couple folks got caught out there before they closed it off." I swallowed. "A girl named Lena Holt?" He looked surprised, then slowly nodded again. "Yeah. You knew her?" I stopped myself. I didn't know what to say. "I picked her up." His expression hardened. "Tonight," I said, almost whispering. "She was standing by that old sign, said her car broke down. I gave her a ride." He stared at me like I'd confessed to something unspeakable. Then he stepped out from behind the counter and walked to the front door. "Come here." I followed him outside. The fog had lifted a little, enough to see the highway stretching out east. He pointed. "That direction there, past mile marker 63, that's where they found her." "Found her how?" "Trapped in her van. Same kind you're driving. Flood took them both. Never found the driver, though. Just footprints leading up the hill, then nothing." My mouth went dry. The ground felt unstable beneath my boots, like the world had tilted slightly off balance. I turned back to look at my van. The windows had fogged again, but through the blur I could make out a faint outline in the passenger seat. A shape, still, watching. The old man followed my gaze. "Son," he said slowly, "you came from that road?" I nodded. His jaw tightened. "Then you best leave that van right where it is." I couldn't. Every part of me wanted to believe this was a nightmare I could wake from. I told him I'd just drive into the next town, maybe find a place to rest. He shook his head, muttered something under his breath I couldn't catch, and went back inside. When I turned again, the van's engine was idling. I hadn't left the keys in it. The passenger door opened with a slow creak, and from inside came a voice, soft, like wind moving through dry grass. "Come on," it said. "You're already part of the road now." I stepped back, but my body felt heavy, like gravity itself was pulling me toward the open door. My own reflection stared back from the glass, faint, distorted, and behind it, her face. Lena. She was smiling this time. Not cruelly, almost sad, like she pitied me. I don't remember making the choice to climb in. My mind was screaming don't, but my hands were already gripping the wheel, the leather slick with cold moisture. The headlights turned on by themselves, spilling light across the wet asphalt. The world outside blurred. The gas station faded into gray. And when I looked at the dashboard, the clock had reset again. 11:03 p.m. The engine rumbled low, steady. I pressed the gas, and the van rolled forward. The road was different now. No more cracked pavement, no markers, just a winding strip of darkness stretching out beneath a starless sky. Water shimmered on either side, reflecting faint shapes that looked almost human. Every few miles, I thought I saw faces in the fog, people standing at the edge of the water, watching. Lena sat beside me again, hands folded, that faint smile never leaving her lips. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Back," she said softly. "Always back." I wanted to fight it, to turn around, to slam the brakes, but there was no place to turn, no shoulder, no lights, no world outside the headlights' reach. After what felt like hours, the van slowed on its own. Up ahead, through the mist, stood that same rusted sign. Ralston Flats, 6 miles. The road had folded in on itself. I turned to her. Why me? Why this? She looked down at her lap, her voice barely a whisper. Because you stopped. Nobody stops anymore. And then she began to fade. First her outline, then her face, dissolving into the same thin gray that filled the road. Wait, Lena, I shouted, gripping the wheel until my knuckles went white. Tell me what you want. Her voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Remember us. The engine sputtered, coughed, then died. Silence. The fog cleared slowly, like a curtain lifting. I was back on the original highway, dawn bleeding into the horizon. My van sat crooked on the shoulder, engine cold. The passenger seat was empty. The backpack was gone. For a long time, I just sat there, watching the first light touch the road. Eventually, a trucker stopped, leaned out his window, and asked if I needed a tow. I told him yes, but when he looked at my license plate, his face went pale. Man, he said, I swear I passed this same van on this same stretch last night. Thought it was abandoned. I didn't have an answer. I just nodded, let him hook the van up, and watched the cursed road disappear in the rearview mirror. When I finally reached a motel a few towns over, I collapsed onto the bed and stared at the ceiling until sleep took me. I dreamed of water. When I woke, my phone buzzed with a weather alert. Flood warnings for the Ralston Flats area. 10 years to the day since the first storm. I stepped outside, sunlight cutting through the mist, and for a moment I thought I saw her, standing by the road, thumb out, hair caught in the wind. But when I blinked, there was nothing. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the road wasn't finished with me, because every time I drive now, no matter where I go, the clock on my dashboard flickers to 11:03 p.m., and sometimes, just for a second, I catch a glimpse of her in the passenger mirror. Silent, watching, waiting for someone else to stop. No one tells you that the scariest thing about America's national parks isn't the wildlife, the cliffs, or the storms. It's the places you're not supposed to find. My name is Evan Black, I'm 34, and I've been living full-time in my Volkswagen Westfalia for just over a year now. I had this plan, this dream, that I'd chase every national park in the United States. I'd collect memories, quiet sunsets, and the kind of freedom that doesn't come with a mortgage or a boss breathing down your neck. But freedom is a strange thing. It looks beautiful from a distance, until you realize what it costs. I'd been camping just outside Bryce Canyon in Utah when this began, one of those designated national forest boondocking spots where rangers rarely patrol and silence takes on a shape. The sky that night was so dense with stars it felt artificial, like someone painted constellations on black glass. My campfire burned low, turning the surrounding ponderosa pines into crooked silhouettes. The air smelled like sap and dust and a faint sweetness I couldn't quite place. I told myself it was just the wild, the untouched world doing what it does. That was before I noticed the reflection. Not in the firelight, not in my van's windows, above me. The stars shimmered in the wrong places, forming a sliver of a bright arc that didn't belong. At first I thought I was imagining it. The desert can play tricks on a tired mind. But the more I stared, the more I saw shapes vanish, replaced by a curved strip of light that moved slowly, like a blink in the sky. A ranger had warned me earlier that day about wandering after dark, not because of bears or cliffs. He just said, stay where other travelers stay. Don't go chasing quiet. It's never really quiet out here. His voice stuck with me. The dude looked exhausted, sunken eyes, skin pale beneath the uniform. He kept glancing over his shoulder like someone was about to tap him. I assumed he'd seen too many tourists fall into ravines, but later I wondered if he was afraid of something else entirely. I shook off the strange impression in the sky and went back inside the van. The Westie creaked as I shut the sliding door, and I locked it more times than necessary. I laid in my fold-out bed, the mattress thin, the smell of the previous owner's surf wax still lingering in the upholstery. I thought it would take minutes for exhaustion to pull me under, but the quiet wouldn't let me sleep. There's a flavor to silence in remote places. It isn't peaceful. It's alert, like the world is listening for movement. I heard a knock, soft, measured, like someone tapping two fingers on metal. I froze. My hand hovered just above my flashlight. The knock came again. Same rhythm, same pressure. Not wind, not loose hardware. Something intentional. My chest tightened. I cracked open one of the curtains, just a sliver, and looked outside. The fire was dying, a small orange glow fighting for its life. Beyond that, darkness as solid as stone, I whispered. Probably a branch, but branches don't knock politely. Then, nothing. Silence again, a heavier silence this time, thick with waiting. Minutes dragged into an hour. I kept listening so hard that I began to hear my pulse roaring in my ears. Eventually, the fire died completely. I must have drifted off at some point because the next sound snapped me awake in the dead of night. A whistle. Not bird song, not wind, a melody, hollow and slow, rising from the tree line like someone warming up an instrument with one long, uneasy note. And the longer I listened, the more it sounded familiar, like a song I'd once known but long forgotten. I sat up, adrenaline flooding in. I turned off my phone screen before it could betray me with light. The whistle drifted closer, soft footsteps crunching pine needles. I should have started the engine. I should have driven until the tank ran dry. But fear does a sick thing, holds you in place, makes you curious against your will. So I waited. The footsteps stopped right outside my slider door. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. The darkness outside felt like it was pressing its face against the glass. Then came the voice. Can't really call it a whisper, more like a broken exhale wrapped around words. A man's voice, too close, speaking with rasping effort. Don't look for the places we hide. My skin prickled. My mind raced through explanations. Some messed up prank, a lost hiker, or someone hallucinating in the cold. But none of those possibilities softened the dread sitting like a weight on my ribs. The footsteps retreated. The whistle faded. The forest swallowed everything again. I stayed awake until the first thread of dawn stretched across the horizon. When sunlight finally brushed the tops of the pines, I opened the slider door and stumbled outside, needing to breathe something that wasn't fear. Tracks circled my van, not boot prints, bare feet. The dirt showed deep impressions, long and narrow, each one pointing toward my vehicle, none pointing away. They circled me in the dark. I packed up fast, hands shaking, gravel shooting from my tires as I drove away. I told myself that leaving was smart, responsible, survival instinct kicking in. But the truth? I was running without knowing what I was running from. National park campgrounds always looked friendly on YouTube. Happy families roasting marshmallows, van lifers sipping coffee beside scenic cliffs, rangers smiling as they hand out maps. You never see what happens after the sun melts away the last line of safety. I thought the weirdness ended once Bryce Canyon was in my rearview mirror. But some things, they don't stay behind. They follow. Later that day, I stopped at a remote gas station to regroup. Desert sun hammered down on the parking lot, heat shimmering the pavement like liquid mercury. A tattered poster flapped on a bulletin board outside. Missing camper, last seen near Bryce Backcountry. The photo showed a smiling couple in front of a van. Their van looked a lot like mine. Inside the station, the cashier barely looked up as he muttered, "Fill up fast." Storm coming. The sky was a vibrant blue. No clouds. I didn't argue. As I walked back to the van, someone called to me. "You camp alone?" It came from an elderly man sitting on a bench, sun hat pulled low. His skin looked stretched thin over sharp bones. He stared without blinking, eyes pale and watery like his soul was halfway out of him. "Yeah," I said. "Just me." He shook his head slowly. "You hear things out there? Things walking when there shouldn't be anything walking?" My heart skipped. Maybe he'd just been around too long. Maybe isolation eroded sanity. But I nodded. His voice dropped, suddenly urgent. "If you see a place that isn't on the map, turn around. Don't ever go inside. Before I could respond, the wind cut across the lot, hot and dry. The man looked past me, expression hollowing. They found you already. I turned, expecting someone to be there. No one. Just heat and quiet. When I looked back, the bench was empty. The man was gone. My heart hammered against my ribs. I searched the lot, like the aisles between pumps, the side of the building. Nothing. I didn't hallucinate him. I refused to believe I did. My van suddenly felt like the only safe place left on Earth, which made no sense because that's exactly where everything weird kept happening. Still, I slammed the door behind me, locked it, and peeled out of the station like the asphalt was about to open up. Hours passed. Miles slipped under the tires, but the fear didn't loosen its grip. It felt like the desert around me was holding its breath. By the time I reached Zion National Park, dusk was cooling the air, and sandstone cliffs glowed red as if the sun had left a piece of its fury behind. I should have slept at a real campground. I should have paid the fee and stayed where others could see me. But I still believed solitude was safer than people. I turned down a side road I found on a message board, a secret spot off-grid, supposedly with a stunning view. The road narrowed, rocks scraping the undercarriage, the Westie groaning. Brush grew close on both sides, branches clawing the paint. The sun sank behind cliffs. Shadows stretched longer. And then the road ended. Not at a clearing, not at a campsite, at a gate. A towering metal gate, no lock, no signage, no path beyond, just darkness between the bars, like someone built it to keep something in or keep it out. My headlights flickered. The engine sputtered once, twice. The reflection in the sky, that arc I saw back at Bryce, appeared above the gate, and something moved behind the bars. Something shifted behind the bars. Too tall for a person, too smooth for an animal. My headlights caught only the edge of its silhouette, a faint outline like polished stone. I killed the lights without thinking, my breath sharp in my throat. The desert night pressed in immediately, swallowing the road, the bushes, the horizon. Only the faint shimmer of stars and that curved arc above the gate remained visible. I sat frozen in the driver's seat, palms slick on the wheel. My first instinct was to throw the van into reverse and gun it, but curiosity and fear held me tight. The shape behind the gate stepped forward, slowly, intentionally. My van rocked slightly, as if the earth itself shivered beneath it. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was just a lone hiker caught in headlights. Maybe the silhouette was distorted by the bars. But hikers don't glide. This thing moved with a silent confidence that felt older than the cliffs towering around us. A gust of wind carried something with it, a smell like wet iron and crushed wildflowers left to rot. It hit the back of my throat, thick and metallic. I fought the urge to gag. Then the humming began. Soft at first, low, a vibration more than sound, like the world clearing its throat. The gate trembled from it. My bones did too. I reached for the gear shift. My fingers shook so violently I missed it the first try. The Westie lurched backward, tires crunching over gravel. The humming cut off instantly. The shape behind the gate stepped closer. I didn't wait to see more. The van fishtailed as I ripped down the narrow road, dry branches snapping against the panels. My headlights flickered again, then died completely. Darkness slammed into the windshield. I lurched forward in panic, for engine roaring, relying only on muscle memory and blind adrenaline. When the headlights finally flicked back on, I nearly drove straight into a ravine. The Westie skidded to a stop a few feet from the edge. I slammed the wheel with my palm, gasping for air. My whole body vibrated with the leftover hum still lodged in my chest. I forced myself to breathe, to think. Zion was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place for peace, for reflection. But it felt like every national park I went to was hiding something deeper, something I wasn't meant to witness. I told myself I'd find a real campground, paid, public, full of chatter and harmless noise. The road back twisted like guts inside the earth, and by the time I reached the visitor center lot, it was fully night. Sodium lights glowed amber on empty spaces. The air was cooler here, less suffocating. I parked near a few RVs lined up for the night. Families sleeping. Travelers resting. Normalcy radiated from their rigs, from the quiet confidence of civilization just a few footsteps away. I left the engine running. My mind wasn't ready for silence, but the gas gauge sat too close to empty. I shut it off reluctantly. For the first time since this whole thing began, I let myself hope that being near others might keep the fear at bay. That hope lasted maybe 20 seconds. 3 knocks hit the back of my van. Not tentative this time. Sharp, demanding. I spun around so fast I slammed my knee into the gear shift. Pain shot up my leg, but I ignored it. I stared at the rear doors, waiting for another knock, waiting for the whistle, waiting for the barefoot footsteps. Nothing. Just stillness. I grabbed the flashlight and slipped outside before I could talk myself out of it. Cold air swept over my sweat-drenched shirt. I rounded the van cautiously, and there, on the dusty rear panel, a single red handprint, smeared like someone dragged long fingers across the back of my van. Wet, fresh. I staggered back. There was no one in sight. I swept the flashlight across the lot, empty asphalt under flickering lights. Every other camper was dark and still. No one awake, no one watching. My throat tightened. Something that left a barefoot trail around me the night before had followed me into civilization. It wasn't local. It wasn't tied to Bryce. It was tied to me. I wiped the print off with a rag, hands trembling so hard the fabric slipped twice. I used water from my jug until the streaks faded. I don't know why I was so desperate to remove it. Maybe fear that someone else would see. See and know. I slid back into the driver's seat, locked every door, turned on my interior lights. The fact that they stayed on felt like a small victory. I sat awake for hours, eyes flicking between mirrors, expecting a figure to appear at any second. The parking lot hummed faintly with electrical buzz. My thoughts wouldn't slow down. Every nerve screamed, "Don't sleep." Sometime past 3 a.m., exhaustion finally won. My head dipped forward, and I was somewhere else. Not dreaming, not awake. A state between. I stood inside a narrow passage, rock walls dripping with cold water, the ground sloping into darkness. A soft green glow radiated from deep below. The air was thick, humid, metallic. My heart beat in slow motion. There were voices. Many voices. Whispering the same phrase over and over, words rippling like wind through chambers. "Come inside. You already belong here." Something moved beside me. When I turned my head, even that took effort, my breath froze. It was the silhouette from behind the gate. Closer now. Close enough to see its face wasn't a face at all, just smooth flesh stretching tight over a skull-like structure, features erased as if someone forgot to finish sculpting it. It lifted an arm, too long, joints bending in the wrong places, and pointed deeper into the passage. And in a voice that scraped like wind over bones, it spoke, "Don't look for the places we hide." My body collapsed, not from fear, but because there was no ground. I was falling straight into that green light below. I jolted awake, screaming, hands clawing the steering wheel, drenched in cold sweat. My breaths came in broken chunks. My eyes scanned the lot, still night. Still quiet, still alone, but the fear was awake now. Not the vague dread I'd been ignoring, something sharper, something that understood me better than I understood myself. And then I noticed it. I hadn't left the driver's seat, but the van had been moved. I was no longer under the visitor center lights. My Westie was parked at the edge of the lot, its nose facing the dark wilderness beyond, as if something had positioned me to go. I scrambled to start the engine. It turned over slower than usual, like it had been running. My fuel gauge had dropped significantly. I slammed into drive and sped out, tires spitting gravel, headlights slicing through the black. Every second that passed, that message pounded through my skull. Don't look for the places we hide. I wasn't trying to find anything hidden. I wasn't some conspiracy chaser. All I wanted was to camp, to wander, to experience freedom without feeling hunted. But what if freedom is exactly what draws them? What if isolation opens the door? My phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text. Unknown number. I almost didn't look. When I picked it up, the message was short. "You're close. Stop. Turn around." Attached was a photo. My van. Minutes ago. The rear. The spot where the red handprint had been. Only now. There were three. I dropped the phone like it burned me. My van roared up the highway, engine whining as I pushed it beyond what that old Volkswagen should handle. The desert blurred into a tunnel of black and sandstone, headlights clawing ahead for answers that weren't there. I told myself the photo was a trick, some edited joke, some lunatic stalking hikers for kicks. But the red prints had been real. And if someone was close enough to photograph my van while I sat locked inside, I wasn't alone. Not even when I thought I was. I didn't know where I was driving. I only knew I wasn't stopping until dawn. I needed light, people, noise, anything to drown out the possibility that something out there wanted me for reasons I couldn't comprehend. The highway eventually spat me out into a small town, Springdale, the gateway to Zion. Neon motel signs flickered above empty sidewalks. A stray dog darted behind a dumpster, the clang echoing down the street like a warning. I parked under a bright street lamp next to a 24-hour diner. The glow felt protective, like maybe the dark respected boundaries made by electricity and buzzing lights. I didn't go inside. Didn't trust walls. Didn't trust the idea of turning my back to a window. Instead, I sat gripping the steering wheel until sunrise cracked open the sky. Morning came too bright, too normal. People bustled around the diner, laughing and chatting, like the night held no terror at all. I watched families head into the park, sunscreen and smiles, oblivious to gates in the canyon that led to something wrong. I opened the van door. The smell of breakfast, pancakes, bacon, drifted over. My stomach snarled. I hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. I pretended nothing had happened, just long enough to order coffee and a plate of scrambled eggs. Inside the diner, the chatter melted into background noise, but my senses were on high alert. I scanned every face, every hand, every set of eyes that lingered too long on me. That's when a ranger walked in. Same uniform, same badge, same blank, distant expression as the ranger who warned me in Bryce. But this one looked like he hadn't slept in a decade. His eyes were almost too open, too alert. He ordered a coffee to go, voice hoarse. Before leaving the counter, he looked directly at me. I froze. He walked over, slow enough that each step felt like a threat. "You the guy in the Westfalia?" he asked. My throat tightened. I nodded because lying felt stupid. He leaned in closer, too close, and whispered, "You need to leave the parks. Now." My pulse pounded in my ears. "Why? What did you see?" His jaw clenched. "They're watching anyone who camps alone. They think you're one of them." One of what? He scanned the diner, paranoid, frantic, and shook his head. Then he slid a folded piece of paper onto my table, keeping his hand pressed over mine so I couldn't lift it yet. I had to tell myself not to rip my hand away, not to make a scene. "When night comes," he said, in a voice barely human, trembling like the truth itself terrified him, "don't fall asleep. Don't stop moving. And don't go underground." He stood, walked out, and was gone. My hand shook as I unfolded the paper. A map, not a park map, older, worn, faded ink trails marking canyons and ridges. Most places were familiar: Zion, Bryce, Capitol Reef, Escalante. But then I saw it. A circle, drawn deep inside National Forest land. A label scribbled in rough, hurried handwriting. "The caves we don't mark." I stared, breath short. That humming from the gate seemed to vibrate again in the center of my chest. When the ranger had left, I considered running to him, demanding answers. But fear held me hostage, a fear that if I followed, something else would notice. Instead, I shoved the map into my jacket and darted out of the diner. Families laughed behind me, clinking silverware and morning music. The world remained unfairly normal. Back in the van, sunlight warm on my hands, I tried to believe daylight made everything safe again. I didn't believe it. I drove north of, trying to decide if I should head for civilization or the complete opposite. Every instinct screamed to run back to cities, hotels, crowds, but the other part of me, the part that had chosen this life, chased solitude, was drawn to the unknown circle on that map like gravity. Not curiosity, recognition, because I'd seen it before. In the dream, the descending tunnel, the green glow. My phone buzzed again. I almost threw it out the window, but the message preview froze me. "You can't hide in daylight." Another photo loaded, not of my van, of me, inside the diner, taken seconds ago. A cold wave crashed through me. I looked around wildly. Tourists, locals, none looking directly, none suspicious, but cameras were everywhere. Phones, security systems, windows reflecting 1,000 eyes. I restarted the van, tires screeching against pavement. I ignored the text. I didn't need confirmation that I was being watched. Hours later, I reached a fork in the road. One way led toward the highway. Las Vegas, the illusion of safety. The other, a rough dirt road leading into canyon country, closer to that damned circled location. One path felt like salvation, the other felt like truth. My hand drifted to the fold of paper in my pocket. If I never found out what was happening, would I ever sleep again? Would I ever trust the dark? The Westie turned onto the dirt road as if it chose for me. Dust clouds rolled behind as the terrain grew hostile. Jagged rock teeth, sudden dips, the steering wheel jerking like the van wanted to turn back, but something stronger on the inside kept pushing forward. The farther I drove, the quieter the engine seemed, the softer the world felt. Like entering a padded room designed to keep screams contained. Eventually, I reached a sign, if you could call it that, a rusted metal post. Carved letters worn almost smooth, keep out unstable ground, a lie. I knew it instantly. The earth wasn't unstable. The truth was. I parked and stepped out. Heat slammed into me, the kind that dries your breath before it leaves your mouth. I scanned the horizon. For a moment, everything was still. Then I noticed the footprints, not scattered, not random. A line of bare feet leading away from the road, deep, precise, heading toward the canyon wall ahead. The same prints that circled my van. I nearly jumped back inside and floored it. But something invisible tugged at me, a pull from deep inside, like I was following a trail laid long before I was born. The canyon wall loomed, striped in reds and creams and sunburned orange. Its base was shadowed, a dark mouth barely visible beneath overhanging rock. A cave, not marked on any map. Every part of me screamed to leave, but fear of the unknown had become worse than the unknown itself. I followed the footprints, closer, closer. The cave swallowed half the sunlight, and inside the darkness was thick, unmoving, like it had a pulse. I stepped forward, and my phone buzzed. I flinched, nearly dropping it. Another text. This one, a single line. "You are exactly where we need you." The cave exhaled, a whisper of cold breathing across my face, and from the shadows something whispered my name, Evan. Hearing my own name spoken in that still, hollow dark snapped every instinct awake. It sounded like my voice, but not. Like someone had extracted it from a memory, smoothed the edges, then played it back just slightly wrong. I staggered backward, heart stuttering. The canyon stood silent behind me, the desert sun glaring too bright, like the outside world refused to acknowledge what was breathing inside this cave. A cool draft surged from the shadows again. Not random. Summoning. I tightened my grip on my flashlight. Its beam cut through a thin strip of the black, illuminating slick, damp stone. Drops of water slid down the walls as though the cave were sweating. "Evan, come inside." This time, multiple voices, stacked versions of my own. Older, younger. Laughing, crying, pleading. My legs trembled so violently I nearly collapsed. For a breath, I considered turning around, sprinting to the van, flooring it until the engine melted. But then I saw something that pinned me in place. Scratches carved deep into the rock beside the entrance. Desperate, jagged plea etched into stone. Not a cave. A door. Don't let it open. The letters ended abruptly. A smear of red-brown dragged downward like the writer was torn backward mid-sentence. The flashlight flickered. No, not the light. My vision. A shudder rippled through my skull. The world tilted. My knees buckled, and suddenly I wasn't standing anymore. I was falling. Not physically, just transported like the dream had swallowed reality whole. My eyes stayed open, but the cave stretched deeper than physics allowed. Passageways multiplied like branching veins. The green glow pulsed far below, heartbeat steady, urging me forward. I heard footsteps behind me. Not human, not four-legged. A dragging shuffle like something tall but unfamiliar with having feet. I turned too slowly, flashlight beam trembling, finding nothing. Then my phone buzzed violently in my pocket. I almost screamed. My hands fumbled for it. desperate for any anchor to sanity. A new message. No number. No name. You've seen the door. Now keep going. You're almost home. Home. The word made my stomach lurch. This wasn't home. This was a crypt wearing a mountain's skin. Who are you? I whispered, the sound of my voice brittle. Another message instantly. The ones who left, the ones who wait, the ones who survive beneath. I swallowed hard. Survive beneath. A skittering sound echoed deeper inside. Hundreds of tiny claws, or one enormous thing shifting its weight. The cave breathed again, cool air brushing my neck like lips shaping another whisper. Even. That was no mimic of my voice. That was hunger, hoping I'd believe it was familiar. I stepped back toward daylight. The flashlight beam swept upward, and I froze. Paintings covered the wall in sprawling spirals, not handprints. Fingerless marks, broad edges dragged in wet pigment, forming shapes that resembled eyes without pupils and human figures missing faces. One symbol repeated. A ring. Not closed, a broken circle. The same curved arc I'd seen in the sky above Bryce and the gate. The light flickered again. And I noticed something else. The bare footprints I'd been following didn't simply lead into the cave. They emerged from a crack deeper within. A crack just wide enough for a body to slip through. A crack with too many toes pressed into the dirt around it. The earth rumbled. Not an earthquake. Something large shifting farther down. My brain finally shouted the command survival had been screaming for. Run. I spun around and sprinted toward the entrance, only to see a figure blocking the light. A man. A park ranger. His silhouette betrayed the uniform before the flashlight did. He stepped inside, hat shadowing his eyes, one hand resting on his belt, but his stance, wrong. Bent. Joints misaligned like he was wearing a human body the way a child wears clothes 2 sizes too big. He spoke without moving his mouth. Don't look for the places we hide. The same phrase, the same cadence. But his lips stayed sealed tight. He lifted his hand. His fingers were too long. They stretched like wet clay, joints groaning as they reached. I didn't think. I ducked under his arm and bolted out into sunlight. The sudden brightness stabbed my eyes, but I didn't stop. Gravel slid under my boots as I sprinted for the van. My breath tore in ragged heaves. The world spun. Behind me, the ranger thing didn't chase, didn't run, just watched. The sun hit its face, revealing smooth flesh where eyes should be, like the figure at the gate had put on a costume and forgotten how a human worked. I fumbled with the keys, dropped them, cursed, snatched them from the dirt, and practically dove inside. The engine coughed once, twice, then roared to life. As I peeled away, I made the mistake of looking in the side mirror. It stood in the sun's full glow now. And the shadow it cast, the shadow didn't match. What stood there was one shape. What hit the ground behind it was something enormous, limbed, crawling like a creature waiting to shed its disguise. I didn't blink again for miles. Trees blurred into streaks, rock formations turned to smears. My hands locked on the wheel as if I were gripping the thin edge between this world and some underlayer of reality. Daylight lasted forever. Night came too soon. The temperature dropped sharply as I reached a lonely stretch of highway. My breath fogged the windshield. Stars crept back out, filling the sky with lies of safety. Then I saw the phosphorescent arc, stretching overhead, brighter than before, a perfect twin of the one above the gate. It pulsed. And the radio crackled alive, not to music, not to static, to a voice exactly like mine. Don't fall asleep, don't stop moving, and don't go underground. The last warning repeated until every syllable fractured into distorted growls. Then silence. No, not silence. Knocking on the roof. Soft, polite taps, like someone hanging on the ceiling of my moving van. My vision tunneled. My body ran on instinct and terror. I slammed the gas until the engine screamed. The knocking grew louder. Then a voice whispered through the metal, "Stop, we're ready. Come home." A shape slid down the windshield, boneless, graceful, like a human shadow without a human. My tires screeched as I swerved wildly, too wildly. The world flipped, van tumbling, metal exploding around me, glass shattering, pain flashing white, then stillness, dust settling, blood ringing in my ears, a strange quiet too heavy to be life. I was upside down, still buckled, heartbeat echoing in a cavern of pain. I smelled it again, wet iron, rotting flowers, footsteps crunched toward the overturned van, bare, measured, patient. The door creaked, and something leaned inside, breath cold on my cheek. Welcome back. Everything went dark. Darkness has a weight when you're trapped underneath it. When I came back to consciousness, that weight pressed down on my chest, forcing shallow breaths. I tasted copper. Something warm trickled from my scalp into my ear. My legs were twisted awkwardly against the ceiling. No, the floor. No, the van was still on its roof. The windshield was a spiderweb of cracked stars. A whisper floated through the silence. Not words. Breathing. I kept my eyes closed. The voice in my head, my real voice, warned me that opening them might end everything. But curiosity is cruel. I opened them. The cave ceiling was above me. Not the van's roof, not the night sky. Rock, dripping, pulsing. I was underground again, my body convulsed with horror. I gagged on panic. I scrambled backward, hands slipping in slick mud, my spine hitting cold stone. Every step scraped the soles of my boots across the cave floor. This wasn't possible. I crashed the van. I should be on the highway, not here unless I'd never left. Unless the crash wasn't an escape, only a reset. My flashlight lay nearby, its glass cracked, beam faint but alive. I grabbed it with shaking fingers and swept the cave. Bare footprints surrounded me, dozens, hundreds, all pointing inward, toward me. Then a new noise, a soft drag, fabric over stone, something stepped into the beam. Not a creature made of nightmares, not that smooth-faced imposter. A person, a young woman, dirt on her cheeks, clothes torn, eyes wide with a desperation that I understood instantly. She put a finger to her lips. Don't let them know you're awake. Her whisper was ragged, terrified, real. I swallowed hard. Who are you? She hesitated, glancing behind her like shadow-listening shapes lurked there. Alex, she breathed. I've been stuck here for days, maybe weeks. She choked on her own fear. They take people who camp where they're not supposed to. The rangers try to keep us away, but it's bigger, older. She grabbed my wrist, grip trembling and urgent. You have to move before they notice you fell back in. Come on. She led me through a narrow crevice, flashlight bobbing. The tunnel twisted downward, back walls slick and cold. Every drip echoed like a countdown. How do we get out? I asked quietly. She didn't answer. We reached a cavern where the green glow brightened, radiating from a fissure in the earth, like the planet was bruised and leaking sick light. Alex crouched behind a pillar of rock, pulling me low. They watched from above. I scanned the ceiling and saw them. Shapes like skeletal bats, skins stretched thin between elongated limbs, their heads tilted back, empty faces sniffing the air as though scent replaced sight. One unhinged its jaw, far too wide, releasing a sound too low for ears, but deep enough to tremble my bones. Alex's nails dug into my arm. They sensed movement through vibration. If you run, they follow, I whispered. Then how do we? She covered my mouth. Silence flooded over us. Something else entered the cavern. Taller, heavier, too much limb, barely any neck. Its torso bent and twisted like it was learning how to imitate a human shape. It carried tatters of a ranger's uniform. My stomach clenched as I recognized the remains of the badge, Bryce Canyon National Park. It turned mechanically, scanning with that featureless face. And then, with a sickening crack, its head rotated a full 180 degrees. My breath stopped. Alex nodded once, eyes filled with urgency. Now. We moved slow. So slow. Every step a prayer. We slid into another passage, the glow dimming behind us. When we were far enough, Alex finally whispered, It's not just Zion, or Bryce, or any single park. They're all connected. The tunnels underneath, the old caves, what the government calls karst systems and erosion. She shivered. It's a network. They move through it. They feed through it. I tried to process. This wasn't just a bad night. This was a hidden ecosystem of monsters beneath some of the world's most beloved wilderness. Alex's voice cracked. There's a map, a real one. Rangers used to train on it. Shows all the places with restricted zones, the places that weren't meant to be parks, but prisons. We emerged into a much larger chamber, and I froze. The walls weren't rock anymore. They were carved. Rows of names etched deeply. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands, missing persons, some scratched out, some circled, some still wet. My stomach turned when I found a fresh one. Evan Black. Under it, another carved line. Arrived. Alex grabbed my hand. We need to go. Now. She led me toward a sloping passageway. The air shifted, less metallic, more natural, the faint scent of pine. Hope flickered. Behind us, a roar shook loose dust from the ceiling. Those skeletal watchers took flight, wings beating like curtains of bone. They found us. Alex shoved me forward. Don't stop. We sprinted. Our footsteps thundered, exactly what we weren't supposed to do. I heard the creatures gaining ground, claws scraping stone. The sunlight appeared, a thin blade at the tunnel's end. Almost out. Alex screamed. I skidded to a stop. A hand, no, a talon, had snatched her leg from the dark behind us. She clawed at the dirt, eyes wild with terror. Help! Help me! I grabbed her arms, pulled, hard, harder. My shoulders nearly tore from their sockets, but another hand wrapped around her, then another. The things dragged her backward, inch by inch. She sobbed silently, too terrified to make sound. Evan, please. I braced my boots, pulled with everything left in me. The creatures shrieked in fury. Then her grip slipped. Her bloodied fingernails scraped rock before vanishing into black. Her scream echoed once, then cut short. I stumbled forward instinctively as if to chase, but the whoosh of wings behind me made the choice for me. I ran. I dove into daylight just as something snapped at my ankle. I rolled hard onto the desert floor, sand burning my palms. I turned back. The cave entrance had changed. No longer a jagged maw, now a flat wall, unbroken rock, sealing itself like the earth swallowed the truth without leaving a scar. The sun blazed overhead. The sky pretended nothing happened. Bare footprints led up to the wall. None led away. Alex was gone. Everything was gone, except me. I lay there for a long time, chest heaving, heart splintered between guilt and survival. The wind brushed the sandstone as if erasing the last memory of what happened below. Eventually, I stumbled to my feet. My van, a mangled shape, rested nearby. Metal caved in like collapsed lungs. Windshield shattered, axle bent, the roof crushed flat. No way it drove here. But something wanted me above ground again, wanted me free, wanted me to speak. The glowing arc in the sky flickered, like a signal or a reminder. Don't look for the places we hide. I knew then what they were, or at least what they wanted. Witnesses, harbingers, messengers who walked the surface while the world remained blind. My name was already carved into the stone. Now it was carved into fate. I staggered down the dirt road toward the highway, every step heavier than the last. The desert heat wrapped around me like a warning I'd never stop carrying. Maybe I escaped the caves, but the truth escaped with me, and the parks are waiting. I walked for hours, sand and gravel grinding beneath torn shoes, sunlight bleaching all the color from the world. Every step forward felt like a betrayal, like I was leaving Alex behind, sealed in a nightmare below the earth, while I stumbled into a reality pretending to be safe. Cars passed occasionally, tourists smiling behind cooled glass, music pumping, excitement for the trails and viewpoints ahead. I tried to wave one down. My arm barely lifted. No one noticed. They were heading toward beauty, the curated postcard version of America's wilderness, not the version I now understood. Eventually, someone pulled over. A middle-aged couple in a rented SUV. The woman rushed out, hand over her mouth. "Oh my God, are you all right?" Her voice sounded like a gentle song from a lifetime ago. My lips cracked when I tried to speak. "Accident," I whispered. "Just dropped the van. Need a ride to town." The man helped me into the back seat. It smelled like sunscreen and hope. I stared out the window as the desert rolled by, deceptively empty, like a stage before the actors crawl out from underneath. The woman turned toward me. "You're lucky we saw you. Not many folks out here this early. Lucky." The words struck me like a cruel joke. They dropped me at a small medical clinic. A doctor stitched the gash along my temple, wrapped my ribs. I lied smoothly about everything. A single vehicle rollover, no one else involved. No other details. He handed me discharge papers and warned me to rest. As I sat outside, bandaged and exhausted, I looked up. The curved arc in the sky was gone. For a moment, I wondered if all of this had been the hallucination of a concussed mind desperate for a story. But trauma doesn't invent names on cave walls. It doesn't leave van wreckage in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't carve warnings into bone-white stone. My phone vibrated. I had signal again. Notifications poured in, missed calls, voicemails, surveys from national park entry systems, all normal things. Then, one new message. Unknown number. You started looking. You can't stop now. Attached was a GPS pin, somewhere in Montana, deep inside another national park. My breath hitched as I stared at the screen. They weren't done with me, and they didn't want me silent. The pin pulsed again, as if time were running out. I powered the phone off, sat still for several long minutes. My heart pounded slowly now, not with fear, but something colder. Resolve. Because this wasn't just mine anymore. It never was. Thousands of names on those walls. People who vanished on adventures. Families given polished statements about accidents, exposure, wandering off trail. But the truth was deeper, hungrier, older. Those caves weren't naturally carved. They were designed, they were cages, and something inside had learned how to imitate the jailers. The ranger at the diner, the terrified one, he tried to warn me. Don't fall asleep. Don't stop moving. Don't go underground. He knew. They all know. National parks weren't established to protect nature from people. They were created to protect people from what lives beneath nature. I sat up straighter. That adrenaline of survival, the one that once pressed me toward escape, now sharpened into purpose. Alex's voice echoed in my skull, her grip on my wrist, her nails scraping stone. They need to be stopped, not by guns, not by authorities who have buried this truth for generations, by exposure, by sunlight. By people like me, and maybe like you, who wander into the wild believing freedom is just a beautiful view away. I looked down at my bandaged hands. Dirt still clung beneath my nails, stained dark from the cave. Proof, if only to myself, that it was real. I forced myself to stand. My muscles screamed. My ribs ached. But my voice finally was steady. I need another van. It sounded ridiculous, the idea of returning to the road after barely surviving it. But my first van took me into the dark. Maybe the next one would take me to the truth. I walked into the future with trembling knees but a steady heart. No more pretending national parks are just about beauty and wonder. No more camping alone like I'm invincible. No more thinking horror stories are warnings for someone else. The world teaches us to fear the surface. Bears, storms, getting lost. But the real danger isn't what waits above the ground, it's what thrives below. If you camp in a Volkswagen, if you love the silence of the forest, the solitude of the stars, consider this a warning. Don't go chasing the quiet. Don't follow the footprints. Don't walk through unmarked gates. And never, never look for the places they hide, because they'll see you doing it. They'll hear when you ask too many questions. They'll feel your footsteps in the dirt. And they will welcome you. Home. I turned on my phone and looked again at that Montana pin. A cold smile tugged at the corner of my mouth, born not of courage, but of necessity. They've been hunting us for generations. Now, we hunt back. And if you're hearing my voice right now, if you ever find yourself alone beneath a sky full of stars and secrets, remember what I learned the hardest way possible. The parks were never meant to protect nature. They were built to protect you from what lives beneath the surface, from what never stops watching, from what knows your name. Evan, don't look for the National Park RV secret, because once you start looking, it starts looking for you. I've always believed that preparation could save your life, that if you planned your route, double-checked your supplies, and treated nature with respect, nothing could truly go wrong. That belief had carried me through 100 nights beneath the stars, in the back of my old Volkswagen camper van. That soft hum of its idle engine, the creak of its old suspension like a heartbeat against the earth. But what I didn't realize was that sometimes the wild doesn't test what you've packed. It tests what you're running from. I left Oregon that summer with the plan to spend 3 quiet weeks crossing through the Northern Rockies, filming a personal survival series I was building for my channel. I'd quit my job 2 months earlier, a safe, comfortable office position that had slowly drained me. And I told myself I'd use this trip to reconnect with who I was. I think deep down, I was running from that hollow silence that had built up in my life. It's strange how silence can feel heavier than noise when you've been avoiding yourself for too long. The first few nights were perfect, the kind of memories you wish you could trap in a bottle. I parked beside a shallow lake in Idaho, cooked simple meals, listened to loons call across the water, and fell asleep with my side door open to the smell of pine and gasoline. My Volkswagen had been through worse. It sputtered sometimes, coughed at higher altitudes, but it always came back to life. That van felt like the only thing that understood me, old, dented, reliable when it mattered most. The trouble started on the fourth night. I was driving through the Bitterroot Range, chasing a campsite a friend had recommended months ago, a place called Crane Hollow, tucked off an unmarked forest road. It wasn't on any map, but I'd been given coordinates. "It's quiet," my friend had said. "Nobody goes there anymore. Perfect for filming." The drive was rough, narrow switchbacks, a cliff edge on one side, the forest pressing close on the other. The air felt colder than it should have for late June. I remember glancing at the dashboard clock, 8:37 p.m., just as the last strip of sun faded behind the peaks. The forest went dark fast, the kind of dark that eats headlights. When I finally reached the clearing, it felt almost staged, a perfect semicircle of dirt ringed by towering firs, the ground packed firm as if it had been used often. Yet there were no other tire tracks, no footprints, no recent fire pits, just a single weathered sign nailed to a leaning post: "Camp at your own risk." I thought it was a joke, maybe a leftover relic from before the Forest Service shut this place down. I even laughed, pulled the van into position, and switched off the engine. The forest swallowed the sound instantly. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No wind, no birds, not even insects. It was as if the air itself was holding its breath. I busied myself setting up camp, folding chair, stove, camera tripod. The normal rhythm kept me grounded. I started filming a short segment for my audience about wilderness readiness. When you're camping in a place with no cell service, always let someone know your last coordinates before nightfall. My voice sounded hollow in that clearing, like it was bouncing back from somewhere deeper in the woods. I kept pausing between takes, certain I heard faint movements, snapping twigs, shifting weight, too deliberate to be the wind. But every time I turned my light toward the sound, the trees looked unchanged. By midnight, I was sitting in the van, half asleep, the engine still warm. That's when the knocking started. It was faint, 3 slow taps from somewhere along the side panel near the back wheel. Then silence. I froze, staring at the dark window. My first thought was an animal, maybe a deer brushing past. I waited, listening. Another 3 knocks. Harder. I killed the cabin lights and reached for my flashlight, breathing through my teeth to stay quiet. The woods outside were black, endless. I aimed the beam low and circled the van. Nothing. No footprints. No broken twigs, just the whisper of cold air moving between the trees. I tried to rationalize it, metal contracting in the temperature drop, maybe. But that sound had rhythm, intention. I climbed back in, locked the doors, and lay there with my sleeping bag pulled to my chin, the flashlight still in my hand. Every creak of the van's frame sounded magnified. I must have drifted off sometime after 2 a.m. because when I opened my eyes again, dawn light was filtering through the windshield. Relief came fast. Morning always makes things seem smaller, until I stepped outside. There were prints in the dirt, bare feet, small, narrow, almost childlike, circling the van twice before trailing off into the tree line. For a long time, I just stood there, hands on my knees, trying to make sense of it. No one could have hiked up here barefoot in that cold, not without leaving other signs. I followed the prints a few yards, but they disappeared in the pine needles. I packed fast that morning. I didn't even make coffee. Just threw everything back inside the Volkswagen and started down the road. My hands were shaking so bad I kept missing gears. When I finally hit cell service again, I called my friend who'd given me the coordinates. He sounded confused. Said he'd never actually been there himself, just heard about it from some guy he met at a campground near Missoula. He couldn't even remember the guy's name. Something about that didn't sit right. I drove until dusk and stopped at a small established campground by a river. Families were there, laughter, tents glowing with lantern light. It felt almost unreal after the isolation of Crane Hollow. I slept easier that night, surrounded by the soft murmur of people. But around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of my van door handle jiggling, not forcefully, just a slow, methodical test, metal clicking against metal. I froze again, listening. Then came a faint whisper through the thin door, a child's voice, almost sing-song. "You shouldn't have left." My blood ran cold. I didn't even breathe. I waited, flashlight in hand, until the sound stopped. Then I jumped into the driver's seat and started the engine. Headlights flared and I scanned the area, but there was no one. Just mist rising from the river and the other campers still sleeping, oblivious. I left that night, driving aimlessly down the highway until I found a rest stop miles away. I parked, turned off the engine, and tried to calm down. Maybe it had been a dream. Stress. Sleep paralysis. I'd been living off coffee and nerves for days. That's what I told myself. But the next morning, when I checked the outside of the van, there were smudged handprints on the door. Small, pale, like they'd been pressed into dew. I should have gone home right then, but fear does strange things to pride. It makes you desperate to prove you're not crazy. I told myself I'd finish the trip, avoid Crane Hollow, stay to marked campgrounds, stick to daylight driving. Simple, logical. For the next 2 days, it worked. I started to feel human again. The landscape softened as I crossed into Montana. Golden meadows, slow rivers, a sense of open space. I filmed a few clips for my channel, smiling for the camera, though my hands still trembled when I looked too long at the trees. Then, somewhere near Lolo Pass, my engine sputtered. Once, twice. Then died. I pulled over to the shoulder, tried the ignition again. Nothing. Just a dry click. The road was empty in both directions. I grabbed my toolkit, cursing softly, and lifted the rear hatch. That's when I noticed it. Wedged into the dirt behind my left tire. A footprint. Bare. Small. Fresh. And beside it, carved faintly into the dust of my bumper. 3 slow knocks. I stared at those marks for a long time, the morning sun already burning through the mist, making the metal of the van glow. The 3 knocks weren't accidental. They'd been drawn with a fingertip, the kind that leaves a faint, oily residue. I ran my thumb over them, half expecting the smudge to vanish like a trick of light, but it didn't. It stayed there, deliberate, patient, mocking. I checked under the van next, my hands shaking hard enough to clatter the tools in the box. Nothing. No damage, no signs of tampering. Everything looked intact except the battery cable was slightly loose. It shouldn't have come undone like that. I'd tightened it days ago. I reconnected it, tightened the nut, and climbed back into the driver's seat. The engine started on the first turn. For a second, I thought about laughing, the nervous kind that makes you feel foolish for believing in ghosts. But the laugh died before it reached my throat. Because if someone had been following me, messing with my van, they knew how to keep me unsettled without showing themselves. I drove until dusk again, refusing to stop. The sky behind the mountains turned the color of rust, and my eyes stung from fatigue. Somewhere along the highway, I saw a small sign that said, "River's End Camp, 1 mile." It wasn't on my map, but I needed rest. The campground was quiet, maybe 6 or 7 lots near a narrow river that wound through a gorge. There was a faded office trailer near the entrance, empty. The check-in sheets fluttered in the breeze, blank. I slipped cash into the drop box and parked in the farthest lot by the tree line. As I stepped out, the smell hit me first. Not rot exactly, but something metallic, wet, like old blood and rust mixed with river mist. It clung to the air, faint but distinct. I told myself it was minerals in the water or iron in the soil. But every time I inhaled, that smell made my stomach twist. I lit a small fire, boiled water for instant noodles, and tried to focus on normalcy. That's what fear hates most, being ignored. If you can keep doing ordinary things, you can almost convince yourself it's not real. I sat in my folding chair, stirring the noodles, listening to the soft crackle of fire and the murmur of the river. For the first time in days, I let my guard drop. That's when I heard the laughter. It wasn't close. It drifted through the trees on the far side of the river, thin, broken, like a recording played backward. A child's laugh that rose and fell in uneven gasps. It didn't sound joyful. It sounded practiced. I stood up slowly, firelight flickering across the side of my van. The laughter stopped as soon as I moved. "Hello?" I called out, voice cracking. "Is someone there?" No answer, only the rush of the river and the wind moving through the pine needles. I told myself there might be another camper across the water, maybe kids messing around. Still, I put out the fire early, packed everything inside, and locked the doors from the inside. That night, I slept with my flashlight on my chest. Around 2 a.m., I woke to a faint rhythmic sound again. Not knocking this time. Tapping. It came from the roof, light, irregular, like someone walking barefoot over the metal. I held my breath and listened. The tapping stopped, then a slow scraping sound moved across the top of the van, dragging toward the rear window. I sat up, heart hammering. My flashlight beam shook as I aimed it at the ceiling. The sound stopped. I waited, a minute, maybe two, then climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and threw it into reverse. Gravel crunched beneath the tires as I swung the van around to gate, headlights cutting through the darkness toward the trees. Something flickered in the beams for half a second, a pale figure just at the edge of the woods, small frame, tangled hair, bare feet, and eyes that reflected the light like glass. Then it was gone. I drove without thinking, the van rattling over potholes, my breath fogging the windshield. I didn't stop until the campground lights were long behind me and the forest thinned into open road. I pulled over on a dirt turnout overlooking a ravine, killed the engine, and sat there trembling. My mind kept cycling through possibilities. A hallucination, stress, exhaustion, maybe someone local, someone who'd been living out here and took amusement in scaring campers. That had to be it. The logical part of my brain begged me to hold on to that explanation. But underneath it, something deeper whispered that I'd made a mistake, that I'd left something behind in Crane Hollow that wasn't finished with me. Morning came slow. I must have drifted off, because the next thing I remember was the sunlight hitting my eyes through the cracked windshield. Everything looked normal. My van, the trees, the road, ordinary. But when I stepped out, I found a piece of paper wedged under the wiper. It was damp from the night air, edges curled. There were only 4 words written in childlike handwriting. "You didn't listen. Stay." The letters were smeared with dirt. I stood there, holding that paper, the forest quiet as if it was waiting for my reaction. Then, from far down the road behind me, I heard a faint sound, the same slow rhythm of 3 knocks. I got back in the van and started driving again, faster this time. My hands gripped the wheel until they cramped. For hours, I drove without music, without stopping, just the engine roaring like it was trying to outpace something invisible. By late afternoon, I reached a ranger station near Hamilton. The small wooden cabin looked empty, but the door was unlocked. Inside, maps covered the walls, and a single dusty radio sat on the counter. I called out, waited, nothing. Then I noticed one of the maps, a large topographic spread of the entire Bitterroot Wilderness. Someone had circled a few spots in red marker. My eyes froze when I saw one of the circles labeled Crane Hollow. Next to it, in faded pencil, someone had written, "Closed after incident, 1996. There were other notes scribbled beneath it, something about missing campers, unconfirmed sightings, and no physical evidence found. The more I read, the colder I felt. I backed away, heart pounding, when I suddenly heard static crackle from the old radio. A voice, faint but unmistakable, pushed through, "Don't leave the van." The voice sounded young, familiar. Then silence. I turned, scanning the empty ranger station. The air smelled like dust and pine oil, but beneath it, faintly, that same metallic scent again. I bolted for the door, stumbled into the daylight, and jumped into the Volkswagen. My reflection in the side mirror looked hollow, drained like I hadn't slept in days. I needed to leave Montana. That was all I could think. Cross the border, find a motel, sleep for a week. I told myself if I could just reach a town, all of this would fade into memory. Something I'd rationalize later when I wasn't this tired. But as I merged back onto the highway, I saw something in my rearview mirror that froze my blood. The passenger side window, the one I'd kept shut the whole time, had a smear of condensation inside, and drawn in it with a fingertip were 3 small knocks. I pulled over so fast the tires screamed against the asphalt. Dust clouded the air around me, and for a moment all I could hear was the engine ticking as it cooled. My heart was hammering, the kind of uneven rhythm that makes your fingertips go numb. I turned in my seat and stared at the window. The marks were still there, faint but clear. 3 slow smudges drawn from inside the glass. I wiped them away, hard, until my hand left streaks of its own. Then I sat there in the silence, the highway empty in both directions, the horizon washed in the color of ash and steel. Somewhere deep down, I knew I couldn't keep running. You can drive through 100 miles of forest, but if the thing chasing you isn't out there, if it's something you brought with you, the road won't save you. I took a long breath, started the van again, and kept driving east. The road narrowed through a canyon, decked a strip of cracked pavement hugging the mountain. Every shadow between the pines felt alive. I didn't stop until I reached a small gas station near a town called Darby. The place looked half abandoned, but an old man came out when he heard the engine. He looked at my van like it was a ghost. "You came from up near Crane Hollow, didn't you?" I didn't answer right away. His question felt too precise, too sure. I finally nodded. "You know about it?" He sighed, wiped his hands on a rag. "Everyone around here does. That's where they used to bring the lost ones down from. Hikers, kids, even a ranger once. Back in the 90s. He paused, glancing over my shoulder toward the forest. "You shouldn't have gone up there alone." The way he said it, quiet, almost apologetic, made my stomach twist. I asked him what happened in 1996, but he didn't look at me. He just muttered something about a family camping trip that went wrong and turned back toward the store. I could see his reflection in the window as he walked, how he didn't look back again. When I paid for gas, he slid a folded sheet of paper across the counter. It was a photocopy of an old missing persons notice. The grainy photo showed a small boy, maybe 8 or 9, barefoot, smiling with a chipped front tooth. Underneath, Eli Turner, last seen near Crane Hollow, June 12, 1996. I felt a chill roll down my spine, that voice in the night, the laughter, the whispers. It hadn't sounded evil. It had sounded lonely. I thanked the man and got back in the van, the paper trembling in my hands. I didn't want to believe it, but the fear that had once felt external, like something hunting me, was changing shape. Now it felt like pity, like a weight pressing down from above. The road east twisted through the forest again. The sun dipped lower, shadows spilling across the mountains like ink. As I drove, the smell of metal returned, faint at first, then stronger, carried in through the vents. I turned them off, but the scent stayed. The radio flickered once, caught static, and then a soft voice whispered through the speakers. "Don't forget me." I slammed the dial off. My knuckles were white against the steering wheel. The temperature inside the van dropped suddenly, my breath turning visible in front of me. The headlights flickered, once, twice, then went dark. For a few seconds I was driving blind. The only light was the glow from the dashboard clock, 7:06 p.m., before the entire electrical system died. I coasted to the shoulder, the Volkswagen rattling to a stop. Silence pressed in from all sides. I sat there, every muscle locked until I heard it again. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, coming from inside the rear hatch. This time, I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The sound repeated, knock, 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 and then stopped. The air inside felt too heavy to inhale. I turned my head inch by inch and looked toward the back. Through the dim light from the windshield, I saw something sitting in the reflection of the rear window. A shape, small, motionless. I forced myself to turn around fully, and my flashlight beam caught it. A small, dirt-streaked handprint smeared across the inside of the hatch glass, and below it, etched faintly into the condensation, a name. Eli. My throat tightened. I whispered his name without meaning to, and the instant I did, the van door behind me creaked open, on its own. Just a slow, heavy groan of metal. Cold air rushed in, carrying that smell again, sharper now, almost chemical. I scrambled for the door handle, stumbled outside into the freezing dusk. The forest loomed on both sides, and somewhere down the slope below, I heard something moving through the brush, small, quick, almost playful. I turned on my flashlight, shaking it until the beam steadied, and followed the sound. The slope was steep, the dirt soft underfoot, but I kept going until I reached the edge of a clearing I hadn't noticed before. In the center of it stood the remains of an old fire ring, stones blackened with soot, half buried in moss. Around it, scattered in the dirt, were scraps of cloth, a broken flashlight, the twisted frame of what looked like a child's shoe. And there, leaning against one of the stones, was a small wooden sign, half rotted, words carved in with a knife. Stay until someone finds you. That's when the forest went quiet again. Not peaceful quiet, the kind that hums before something breaks. The trees seemed to lean inward, the air thicker, colder. Then came a soft voice behind me. I waited. I turned the flashlight, but there was no one, just the trees. But I could feel the presence, close, almost brushing against my shoulder. I waited, the voice said again, lower now. You were supposed to stay. Something inside me cracked then. Not fear, not quite. Guilt. I dropped the flashlight and whispered, I'm sorry. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the wind picked up, swirling the dirt and ash from the old fire ring into the air. It spun around me, fast, almost blinding. I stumbled back, covering my face. When it settled, the clearing was empty again. The shoe, the cloth, the sign, all gone. Just pine needles and the faint outline of a circle burned into the ground. I backed up the slope toward the van, my legs shaking. When I reached it, the headlights flickered to life on their own. The engine started. I didn't question it. I drove until I saw the first town lights hours later, checked into the first motel I could find, locked the door, and left the van running in the parking lot until dawn. I never went back to Crane Hollow, never went near the Rockies again. But sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, I still hear it. 3 slow knocks against the window, soft as breath. And I wonder if the wild isn't a place you escape from. Maybe it's a mirror that forces you to see what you've left unfinished. Out there, it doesn't matter how prepared you are, or how much gear you've packed, or how brave you think you'll be. The wilderness has a way of peeling you back to your core, stripping away everything you've built to hide from what haunts you. I thought I was running from fear, but maybe all along, I was running from someone who just didn't want to be forgotten. Now, every time I start that old Volkswagen, I whisper his name under my breath. A promise, maybe, or an apology. Because if there's one thing I've learned out there, it's this. Sometimes surviving the wild isn't about escaping what's chasing you. It's about facing what still waits for you in the silence.